drove like this, no doubt you'd be arrested. Me, I get paid for it.
IndyCar racing is a big-time sport, one of the biggest in the USA. Its 16-event calendar covers the country from coast to coast. 1 million people visit the races, and the Indianapolis 500 is the world's largest sporting event, with 400,000 people at the trackside. This is an expensive sport. It costs $2 million just to get one competitive car onto the track. There's big prize money too, $300,000 for the season's overall winner. Even a first prize of $20,000 for the best pit crew. And a win at the Indianapolis 500 can be worth over $1 million. There are no less than 38 drivers who have won more than $1 million in IndyCar racing. The 27th member of that exclusive club is Bobby Rahal. Among many other distinctions, he's recorded the fastest ever IndyCar lap with a speed of 215 miles an hour in 1985. Some of the biggest corporations in the USA are involved in IndyCar racing. And drivers like Mario Andretti, Johnny Rutherford, and Al Unser are heroes to their fans. The racing is exciting. Anyone can see that. But we're going to show you just how much work the driver and the team put into preparing the cars, the mental pressure on the drivers, and why the cars are so incredibly fast. Let's take a look under the skin of an IndyCar. Its design is controlled by the sanctioning body, Championship Auto Racing Teams, which specifies the length and width of the car, the engine size, and minimum weight and the maximum wing size. An IndyCar is made in 3 major sections. The tub, to which the front suspension and brakes are bolted, carries the driver. The engine itself forms the second section. The third section is the gearbox, with the rear brakes and suspension bolted directly to it. The way the car is constructed is easier to see as the mechanics strip it down the night before a race. Starting at the back, off comes the gearbox, and with it go the rear suspension and brakes. Even the turbocharger is bolted to the gearbox. There's no separate chassis or frame in an IndyCar. You can't take the engine out. The engine is the car. So remove the engine and you're left with the tub, an immensely strong structure of carbon fiber and aluminum honeycomb.
IndyCar racing is a very limited, very regulated formula in comparison to Formula One. We all have the same basic engine. In many cases, it's the same car. It's either a March or a Lola. The same tires, exactly the same Goodyear tires.
The engine, which has dominated IndyCar racing since the late 70s, producing about 700 horsepower, is the V8 Cosworth Ford. With over 90% of the cars using the same engine, how do you gain an advantage? Crew Chief Steve Horn.
The biggest thing is when you first get your car to accelerate the development, all the little tweaks, modifications, changes, to learn about the car and get the best out of it as quick as you can, and that's really the most exciting thing for me.
The cars have come an awful long way since the first 500-mile race at Indianapolis in 1911. The track was built there because it was then the center of the US automobile industry. The early race cars were stripped street cars using street tires, their engines producing perhaps 100 horsepower, and they lapped the 2.5-mile track at about 80 miles an hour. These were American cars. But from 1913 to 1919, the races were won by European cars, and speeds had risen to around 100 miles an hour. The 20s were dominated by American cars, with technical innovations like Duesenberg's 4-wheel hydraulic brakes. The car also had a supercharger, forcing the fuel into the engine under pressure. In 1930 came the Depression, and the Indy rules were changed to simplify the cars. Now you could get into the race for 1/10 of the price of the year before. In the Depression era, speeds didn't rise much, but the Maseratis, similar to this one, that won the last pre-war races, were up to 115 miles an hour. Racing stopped for the Second World War, But in 1946, George Robson won with an American car at nearly 115 miles an hour again. The shape of things to come was first seen in the 60s, when Jack Brabham's Cooper arrived with its engine behind the driver. Even with 150 less horsepower than the American cars, it qualified well at 145 miles an hour. This signaled the end of front-engined cars. A.J. Foyt's 1964 victory behind an Offenhauser engine was the last at Indianapolis for a front-engined car. In 1965, Jim Clark's Lotus Ford won at 150 miles an hour. But even that seems pretty slow now, compared with the 1985 fastest qualifying lap at 214 miles an hour.
You feel like you're on the end of a string and somebody's running the string around. But the G-forces in the corners, and this year particularly at Indianapolis, it was obviously flat out all the way around. You never lifted off the throttle, never touched the brakes, nothing. And the trick became to see how much you could flatten the corner out. So Indy is very tough on your neck and your hands, your wrists.
The biggest change in the nature of IndyCar racing came in the 70s, when, in addition to oval tracks, twisty road courses were added to the event list. Whatever kind of track the cars are on, the power and speed they have is almost impossible to imagine.
So many times people say, what is it like? You can try to explain it, but you can't, I don't think, do justice to it because it is so alien to your experience just driving a street car or what have you. Let's say you ride on a Boeing 727. It would be like me trying to ask a jet fighter pilot, is there any comparison between the two? And of course there would be none.
So on a cold winter's day at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, we set up a comparison that does show how quick an IndyCar is. On the start line of the 2.4-mile track, there's a Plymouth Reliant, a good modern design front-wheel drive street car with a top speed of about 100 miles an hour, and it's being driven by a member of the True Sports team. Next to it is a Nissan 300ZX Turbo, a sports car that can hit 140 miles an hour and get to 60 in 7 seconds. Team owner Jim Truman, who has won 2 national sports car championships and a Can-Am championship, will drive this one. To spice it up a little, we're giving the street cars a start. First, the Plymouth. It wasn't designed for this, but the front-wheel drive Reliant can really be hustled round the corners. Now, the Nissan, 30 seconds after the Plymouth. The sports car is catching the Plymouth well. But another 33 seconds have passed, so it's time to start the IndyCar.
The things that strike you when you do drive an Indianapolis car is not just the acceleration, but the braking power, the ability to go from very high speeds to very low speeds in a very short period of time, the cornering speeds, just everything about it.
They're on the last third of the track, and now the Nissan is closing on the Chrysler. With contemptuous ease and half a mile to go, the IndyCar catches the street cars. So much for car can do. But what exactly does the driver do? For sure, he does a lot more than just race the car. Take testing or practice, for example.
The big demand is to go out and do consistent laps with changes. Let's say you make a change and you drive harder that one lap and it's a little bit quicker than the previous lap. What is the reason? Is it because you drove harder, or did that change actually work? And so you've got to drive with a degree of consistency that will allow any change that has been made to show.
These changes include altering the ride height of the car, the camber angle of the wheels, making adjustments to the wings, to the springs and dampers, even changing the stiffness of the anti-roll bars.
You rolling it though? It feels a bit rolly in the rear, coming out of the one chicane. But put this power down all right. I think first thing we gotta do is get to respond better going into the corner.
The other major demand is the driver's ability to convey to the chief mechanic, to Steve Horn, to our engineer, to the crew, what the car is doing. You know, it's almost a seat of the pants type of, you have to be able to drive very quickly and yet try to feel what the car is doing. And in testing, you'll make a change and you'll say, maybe the lap time was the same between pre-change and then after the change has been made. But the driver then comes down and says, well, I don't know, it felt a little bit more nervous. Even though the time was the same, it felt more nervous in the corners, or we lost a little bit down the straightaways. So the driver's ability to convey to the team what changes do or don't do, I think, is paramount to a successful team.
Team owner Jim Truman.
He's been driving race cars ever since he was 18 or 19 years old. All kinds of race cars, all kinds of circuits. You couple that experience with a rather high level of intelligence and ability to communicate, couple that further with the pretty thorough understanding of the car and the systems, and I think we have the best arrangement possible to be able to work on a car and make it go fast.
This is the pattern of practice. Out on the track again, and just as surely back in the pits again.
It's the fourth season we've worked together, and Bobby's a very good test driver. He's very good at analysing the changes we make to the car. He has confidence in myself and our engineer that we can analyse the problems, the changes, and try and get the best out of the car.
The last lap I tried stiffening the bar up. Both front and rear. I think it hurt the rear a little bit.
They're discussing the stiffness of the anti-roll bars.
Did you try going full soft at all?
Yeah, I was running full soft most of the session. Turns in okay, a little bit lazy on the turn. Puts the power down all right coming out of here. Through here it's all right. You know, I'm not really getting any wheel spin with the soft bar.
Yeah.
Seems to understeer through this right-hander down here, you know, that late apex.
Yeah.
I just can't drive it into the corner.
Well, you're saying it's good through here and it's good through here. All the left-handers is good and the right-handers understeering.
Yeah.
But also, I think that if we're going...
No, I mean the weights could be off.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it.
You think we should go with some camber in?
Now they're discussing the fact that the car handles differently on left-hand and right-hand corners. So it's been decided to check its weight on each wheel to see that the car is evenly balanced on both sides. In the pits, that's a laborious business because it has to start by making sure that everything is level.
Hey there. I've done the understeer before, so I might as well leave it like that.
One of the crucial things about Indy cars is how the tyres perform. They work differently at different temperatures, and those temperatures have to be carefully checked and recorded. These are not like road car tyres. Goodyear Racing Director Leo Mell.
On a road car, you have to worry about the person running into the curb. We assume these guys are not going to run into the curb, so we don't put sidewalls on it. We want the tire to last until the first pit stop. We don't want it to last 40,000 miles. So we have a very soft compound, a very light, thin tread to dissipate heat, and we're planning for the tire to come off in 100 miles instead of a long time. The driver is really the key to us selecting the proper tire for the proper circuit on the proper day. The tires are all tested thoroughly in the laboratory, but that doesn't give you the feel, that doesn't give you the input from the driver. If you mix up 400 pounds of rubber that you're going to make racing tires with, and you change 1 pound of that material, the 25 or so materials that are in a compound, that can make the difference between 2 seconds a lap, that can make the difference in traction and tread wear and heat resistance and that sort of thing. And that very fine selection, we depend entirely on the driver. Many of the things that are in the current street tires evolved in racing. There's a great interest now in traction and high performance, and in fact, in the last 3 or 4 years in the United States and throughout Europe, high-performance tires are what people want on their cars. The radial tires we developed for Indianapolis to do 230 mile on a straightaway will contribute to tomorrow's tire. We're dealing on the outer fringes of technology, maximum traction, maximum durability, maximum heat resistance.
Qualifying sessions decide the order in which the cars start the race.
You have 2 30-minute sessions per weekend, so by the time you get to qualifying, you have to know that you're very close to the optimum setup you want. You've done that in unofficial testing, so on and so forth. So qualifying generally means going out there with a light load of fuel, 2 or 3 sets of new tyres, and the driver really just driving it as hard as he can in the setup. There's no real time come qualifying to make any major spring adjustments or anything like that.
It's the best lap in any of those sessions that could qualify you for the pole position. That means that you can try to go as hard as you can, and if you make a little bit of a mistake and you're a little bit slower, you say, well, I've got another chance. In oval track racing, depending on where you are, but you get 2 laps, period. And it's the best lap in those 2 laps. And so that is difficult because you don't have, if you don't make it on the first one and you don't make it on the second one, that's it.
But of course, when you do make it, then you're on pole. You start the race at the front of the field and everybody is pleased. Everybody in the team feels the relief from the tension of qualifying, not least the driver's wife.
We won the clean sweep. Nobody can beat us on that. Good job, Bob. Oh, boy. Congratulations, Charlie.
Qualifying may be over, but the mechanics' day is not. They still have to go back to the garage and change the engine, maybe working till midnight on a day when they started at the track at 8 o'clock in the morning.
And it's not like a regular job, guys, let's say the mechanics. They work together every day, generally a 12-hour day. They have to go away and travel together. A lot of the time it's 7 days a week. So let's say small problems that you wouldn't notice in your job with your fellow worker sometimes get amplified. I say to all my people, if you've got a problem, if you're uncomfortable with something, bring it up now and we'll try and sort it out. We may not sort it out to your advantage, but at least you've spoken about it and brought it out. And it's important that these people get along with each other. They don't have to be friends and go out for a beer every night, but they have to respect each other's ability.
the morning of the race, preparations are complete. Now the driver can only wait for the start.
At first, since I didn't know anything about racing, I wanted to be with Bobby all the time. Everywhere he went, I expected to be included. But I think you just learn this is what your husbands are going to do, and you just learn to cope with it, and it is exciting. Race day is very tense. In fact, Bobby and I basically don't talk to one another in the morning. He gets his head together and leans down next to his car, and, he just has to sort out how he's going to drive the race.
In IndyCar racing, there's a rolling start, with the race cars following a pace car for 2 laps. During this time, you'll see the cars swerving across the road. They're trying to increase the friction on their tyres and so heat them up to operating temperature. Bobby Rahal, having qualified fastest, starts at the front.
These cars are pretty strong, there's no question about it. But I think that no matter what car you're driving, the gentler you are with the car, with the gearbox, with the brakes, not over-revving the engine, the better the car is going to run, the longer the car presumably is going to run. And so, yeah, I try to take as much care as possible. On a road circuit, you have curbing, not hitting it. The trick there is, I think, is you've got to work on getting your car to handle so well that you don't need all those things. The car will slide, certainly, but hopefully if you've gotten the car to handle well enough, it's going to slide in a progressive manner and one that you're prepared for. And even with it sliding, you can change direction with the car, or you can use it to your advantage. But I don't think purposefully I go out and slide the car, because it comes down to, again, you want to be gentle with the tires, you want to be gentle with the gearbox, with the engine, with everything. If you're battling for position, strategy definitely comes in, because you know the fellow in front, let's say he's leading and you're second, he isn't just going to pull over and let you by, and he's going to defend his position. Some defend it a bit more aggressively than others, so that you have to make sure that when you do make a pass that you can make it, and there never become a question if it's where you go into a corner and maybe he's just one wheel ahead of you, but you realize that you better back out of it because he isn't going to, and if you don't, then the two of you are going to end up out of the race. So it's a difficult thing. We have to take care of ourselves. I think that's the attitude amongst the drivers, that when we're all out there together, yes, we're trying to beat each other. There's no question. But we have a responsibility to keep each other safe as well. And sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes somebody will make a move that will jeopardize somebody's position in a race, or physically jeopardize them, or what have you. Those people are generally to a degree almost ostracized.
At 1.8 miles per gallon, Indy cars don't carry enough fuel to get through a whole race. The teams try to refuel and change tires in about 10 seconds.
Pit stops are, I think they're good for one thing, and that's entertainment. I don't like pit stops because I think that you can be winning a race and you have to come in for a pit stop, and let's say a wheel nut jams. It won't come off and the guy can't change the tire, or there's a fueling problem, or you stall the car getting out of the pits. These cars are very difficult to get going when they're hot. It can ruin a race. What's exciting to me about a pit stop is when our crew has a great pit stop. I mean, you're in and bam, next thing you know, you're out again, and you can come out with a big lead, or you can stretch a lead. It's a very critical part of the race. On a road circuit, you're shifting, 30 or 40 times a lap maybe. You're braking very heavily. You're turning right, you're turning left. The track is smooth, but it's not as smooth as like Indianapolis, and you're running fairly stiff suspension. By the end of a race, after 200 miles, you're worn out, and it feels like somebody has beaten you in the back with a rubber hose, and your wrists are sore, your neck is sore. I mean, everything is sore. And I think it takes me usually about 2 days after a race before I start to feel somewhat back to normal. Motor racing is a business sport, whatever you want to call it. Luckily, the highs are higher than the lows are low. And so, you could have a string of 5 or 6 non-finishes and you go out and win one race, and that one race erases all the disappointments that you've had over the 6 previous events.
I think it gets under your blood, and once the season's over, you become anxious to get back to it because it is a way of life. And it's fun.
I'm pleased with my time this morning, but I know I'll be covering the quarter mile a lot faster this afternoon.
581, the Budweiser King wins another one. 251 miles an hour.
I just kept waiting for it to get to the other end. Took forever. Took forever. New chute work, huh? She looked good. That's good. That solves a couple of problems right there in the future, right? Yeah.
Drag racing is a big-time sport involving big numbers. Across the USA, there are around 300 racetracks of varying levels of sophistication. On these tracks, about 5,000 events are run each year, sanctioned by the major sanctioning body, the National Hot Rod Association. Using cars of widely different levels of cost and complexity, about 35,000 drivers take part in these events every year. This is a big-time sport with hefty prize money. It costs a great deal to compete in it at a professional level, and at that level, it attracts major corporations as sponsors. The most powerful cars in drag racing are very powerful indeed. Their performance is simply shattering. Take the Budweiser King, for example, Kenny Bernstein's car. It can accelerate from a standing start to around 100 miles an hour in 1.2 seconds. That's so fast, the average person couldn't even begin to imagine it. So to give at least some idea of the performance of a car like this, we're going to compare Kenny's car with a very powerful street car, a Ford Mustang GT. This has a 5-litre V8 motor, and it's one of the fastest street cars sold in the USA. It's being driven by Frank Iaconio, who has won many Pro Stock national events. And here they go. The standard street version of the Ford Mustang GT can cover the quarter mile in 15 to 16 seconds at a speed of over 90 miles an hour. But Kenny's Budweiser King can cover the same distance in under 6 seconds at a speed of over 260 miles an hour. Obviously, even the quickness of the Mustang GT is not able to match the extraordinary power and speed of Kenny's Ford Tempo funny car.
I don't think they could begin to imagine the brute force and the G-forces that the funny car has. As drivers, you respect the power and the speed that these cars can attain. Needless to say, if you don't respect them, then you're going to get hurt because you're going to drive over your head. So you respect them as a driver, but you certainly can't be afraid of it.
Drag races are elimination races. On practice or qualifying days, the cars run until the organizers know which are the fastest 16 in each of the pro classes. These are the cars that have qualified to race. In the sportsman or amateur classes, there can be as many as 200 entries in a single class. Now, there isn't room to line up all those cars in a row, so in each class, the racing is done 2 at a time. As the days proceed, the losing car of each pair is eliminated and the winner progresses to the next round until there are only the final 2 left. Timing in drag racing is to hundredths of a second. This is necessary because the elapsed time, the time the cars take to cover the standing quarter of a mile, is so short that tiny fractions of a second can make a loser or a winner. All timing is electronic, and since hundredths of a second do count, a special system of lights known as the Christmas tree has been developed to make sure each car gets a fair start. Drag racing began in Southern California in the early 50s and was an organized version of racing on the public streets against your friends at night. That era is well remembered by a man who has won many national events, Connie Coletta.
You know, I had friends got killed on the street going too fast with the vehicles, and no safety equipment at all, no helmets, no nothing, no roll bar cages, and, you know, just get on a 2-lane road and do your thing, and one car lose another one. It was always at night because the police and the neighbors were all out during the day, and want no tractor pulling out across the road in front of you. So that's pretty much how that ended up.
The early tracks were local airstrips closed for the afternoon. 30 years ago, this was an unsophisticated sport with many of the cars closely related to street cars.
Well, when we started out, all it was just open frame cars, you know, 4 wheels, no body around you, no roll bar around you, you just sort of hung on and done your thing with it. We didn't have fire suits, we didn't have seat belt conformity, we didn't have the quality of the material, the 5-point cage that the vehicle that you set into, what we call a bathtub, which is the vehicle crashes, it breaks away here, breaks away up there, and sort of contains you. I crashed about 10, 12 years ago, and I ended up at the other end of the racetrack sitting in this bathtub. Everything else had disappeared and was gone.
The original drag races were started by a flagman.
To get real tricky, you had to take a look at them, you know, you watch them, you know, if they wiggle their arm a little bit or something, you know, you could always tell when they were getting ready to bring the flag up. And boy, just as soon as they wiggled their arm or batted an eye or anything, they just hammered it right there.
By the 1960s, the sport looked something like it does now. In the search for extra traction, tires had lost their tread and grown wider.
Our tires are basically recaps when we started out. I mean, we're just a big old balloon tire with a recap, and they put it on it, and, you know, you get going 120, 130 miles an hour, and you can toss a cap off, which I had done. And, you know, it'll scare you. I had the thing come in and hit me in the head. A piece of rubber flopping around on it.
By 1963, there were over 70 classes. Parachutes were being used to stop the cars. The first airfoils appeared. What we now call funny cars were first seen in the mid-60s. They were stock cars with the axles, engines and drivers moved to improve the weight distribution. This made them look funny and the name stuck. At this event alone, there's a total of 302 non-professional entries. Drag racing needs a multiplicity of classes so that it's open to a huge range of people at different levels according to the skill and finance they have available. The biggest division between the classes is that between the sportsman and the pro classes. Top of the pro classes in NHRA are the top fuel dragsters and funny cars. Competitive top fuelers make a pass in about 5.4 seconds, depending on the track. Funny cars are even more popular. They have 500 cubic inch supercharged engines. Their bodies have to be based on the outlines of 1980 or later production cars. Underneath, of course, they are pure racing car. And they make a pass in around 5.6 seconds, reaching over 260 miles an hour. Pro stock cars look more like the car you drive. They have to be based on North American built cars with a wheelbase of over 92 inches. But their engines have to relate to production engines. The bodies have to be the original steel ones, although they can have some fiberglass sections like the hood. In cars like these Ford Thunderbirds, the location of the engine and of the driver all have to be almost exactly as in the street car they're based on. That's why they look like the car you drive. Pro stocks cover the track in around 7.5 seconds. Now we come to the sportsman classes. There are no less than 22 listed in the NHRA rules. The quickest sportsman class cars are the top alcohol dragsters.
See how long the throttle was open.
Yeah, I'll see if I shut early or something, yeah. I don't think I did, but I could have.
I'm very fortunate in having Dale Armstrong, my crew chief, who's been with me 4 years, and not only a crew chief, but a personal friend, which makes it even better. And Dale is an innovator, a person that is totally always trying to stay ahead of the game. Dale really takes care of the race car, the day-to-day routine of the race car, making it available to race wherever it's supposed to be, and he calls most of those shots because that's his department. And he has 4 people working with him, but his right-hand man is Jeff Scarp. And Jeff's just another miniature Dale Armstrong in a lot of ways. A real thinker, a workaholic type person, just loves racing. And that's the kind of person you got to have, is someone that's really dedicated in the hours that it takes to do this sport, up to 80 hours a week in some instances during the season. They share rooms with each other at motels. They go to breakfast together. They go to lunch together. They go to dinner together. A lot of time together. That's very difficult when you put 4 individuals with 4 personalities together for 7, 8 months on the road. And it takes a special individual that really wants to do it. That's the key. They have to want to do this sport in order to make it happen for themselves and be happy with it. And then they have to be able to want to win all the time and fight for that inside their own minds and thoughts and be behind the team and the driver, where we all have the ups and downs together. It's a team effort.
The funny car motor is mounted in the middle of the car. The driver sits right at the back, surrounded by a substantial roll cage. The car is necessarily long and narrow, and although its frame may look flimsy, it's actually very strong. It's made from chrome moly steel. The front wheels carry very little weight, so they're slim and light. The engine in Kenny's car produces a staggering 3,000 horsepower. In comparison, a very powerful street car like the Ford Mustang GT we matched it with has around 200 horsepower. The engine is a 500 cubic inch work of art. It's supercharged. That means it has a huge blower mounted on top of the engine, which puts fuel and air into the engine under pressure. The more fuel that's in there, the bigger the explosion, the more power. Everything on a racing engine like this is specially made.
Motorcraft makes our spark plugs for them, and they make them, the ground wire especially on them is made out of Inconel material, which has a real high melting temperature.
After every run, the engine is stripped down.
Well, that's a large part of the design of the motor, the ability to tear it down real fast between rounds, because it's very important that we get that done in the 90 minutes that they give us.
Funny cars run on nitromethane fuel, which is thought to be highly dangerous, but in fact needs to be mixed with alcohol to make it combustible.
We dilute it with alcohol or methanol to a level that we want, and the level is decided basically by the type of engine you're running, the compression, the rear end gears, lower pressure, lower speed, etc. Right now we're mixing 94.5%. We change this mixture sometimes every run. Sometimes we'll go 3 or 4 runs at the same level. We need more horsepower, we put more percentage in it.
With a street car, you might say it does 32 miles per gallon. This car uses 32 gallons per mile.
It's a special oil that was blended for us by Motorcraft also, and it's 2050 racing oil, but it's also got the ability to stand tremendous pressures before you get any bearing damage.
The tires of a drag race car in the 3,000 horsepower category have to be very, very special. They run at very low pressure. A street car may have 25 to 30 pounds of pressure in its tires. Top Fuel and funny car racers have only about 4.5. And in spite of the terrific stress of putting 3,000 horsepower onto the track, the sidewalls are less than 1/10 of an inch thick, which allows them to flex. The rear tires are 17 inches wide. They're often bolted to the rims to prevent the wheels twisting round in the tires. Slow motion shows us how the tires not only distort, but also actually grow in diameter. Kenny Bernstein and Dale Armstrong are considerable innovators, and the Budweiser King is the first drag race car ever to be fitted with an onboard computer.
We've been working on it for about 2.5 years, trying to make a computer live in that environment, and it's been very difficult, but we have accomplished it now, and the computer has been a real big help to us this year. We monitor engine RPM, shift points, we monitor the fuel delivery system, we monitor blower pressure, we monitor drive shaft speed, and in the near future we'll probably be putting a 5th wheel on the car, which will take a mile-per-hour reading every 5 feet as we go down the course, which will be another big help to us.
This car is the first drag race car to have a body designed with the aid of a wind tunnel. The process started by Kenny selecting the Ford Tempo body as an outline. The street Ford Tempo is an efficient car aerodynamically, so it makes an excellent basis.
Ford provided that for us so we could go in and spend some hours in there, and it gave us a lot of ideas. And then from what we learned in there, the speed of the car went up dramatically. Before that, we didn't realize how important that was, because you think, well, we're only going a 1/4 mile, but these cars will go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in about 200 feet, so you're already going, the large majority of the track, you're over 100 miles per hour, so the aerodynamics really do come into it. And the reason we use the carbon fiber is, first we were trying to get the car lighter, obviously, and that saved us about 35 to 40 pounds. The other thing is, in the wind tunnel with the old fiberglass bodies, you'd get it up to speed and the bodies would start collapsing and going into like a Coke bottle shape and so forth. And the carbon fiber being stronger enabled us to build the car lighter but still make the body rigid so it would maintain its aerodynamic form even at speed.
And as a direct result of all these developments, the Ford Tempo funny car was the first to break the 260 mile an hour barrier. The rear spoiler is especially important in drag racing.
Well, that's to give us downforce as the car gains speed, and that's a very important part of the car. In fact, I think we're still just in the infant stages of getting that figured out. It's going to change drastically, I think, in the next year or two within the limitations they put on us, but we are going to find ways to download these cars even harder. And when we do that, you're going to see speeds increase again, because we're getting tire slippage in high gear quite a bit now.
In the funny car racing, it's a little difficult when a fire occurs because the body is made out of fiberglass, carbon fiber, and it burns very easily and very quickly. So consequently, I wear everything that Simpson makes, everything in the world. I do wear the hood, I wear the underwear, shirt, and I wear the pants and even the socks. So I cover up as best I can. And then, of course, the helmet, which is a fully approved helmet. All the lining on the inside is fireproof. The visor is also fireproof, and certainly gloves. And then the fire suit, which is minty multi-layers thick, probably 12 layers thick.
The driver has a full safety harness to keep him in his seat and in control. In drag racing, the actual track surface is of vital importance.
You really have to stay on top of the track. The track can change drastically. Sometimes it gets a large amount of rubber buildup and then it starts pulling off and rolling up. So you have to really watch each lane as that's happening, because one lane will be good, another one will be starting to do that. So if we're going to race somebody where we think that they would be more critical in the other lane, but we think we can get down the one that isn't so bad, we'll deliberately put the other car in the other lane if it's our choice.
You can't just start up a car like this and race it.
The first routine is when we drive through the water and spin the tires and the smoke comes off the tires, which is called a wet burnout, a smoky burnout. This is to heat the tires up, to get the tires very hot. It's very important that the tires are very hot. When they're hot, they're softer, and they adhere to the asphalt, the concrete, much better. That's the first procedure. As we're backing up, and I back up very slowly, it's to build heat in the engine. Heat is needed in an engine to make horsepower, but not an excessive amount of heat, because then it's too hot, it won't run as well. So we know what temperature I'm trying to get to during each segment of this procedure. Then I go forward again to do what is known as the dry burnout. That means no water. That means just to hit the throttle as hard as you can for a half a second and let right off. That's also to create some more heat in the tires, but the main reason we do that is to put heat in the clutch, to make the clutch slip a little bit, to make it warmer so that it will slip. In these cars, if the clutch doesn't slip properly, you'll spin the tires, smoke the tires, you won't go anywhere. So it's important that we do the dry burnout in our procedure, and some cars don't. They set their cars up differently. Then you back up from there, still building heat to a certain temperature, and you try to leave the starting line within those elements of the temperature, say 10 or 15 degrees. Like in my car, I don't like to be any warmer than 170, but I don't want to be 140 either. So I try to time myself to kind of get to that number of 170. When I back up the last time and I'm ready to go forward to stage the car, then it's time to race, and the procedures are over with. What we try to do when we start at the racetrack with that lighting system is what I call spear the green. I try to concentrate as hard as I possibly can on the last yellow light. When I see it flicker, that's my go signal. It's an instant. It's just push the throttle as quickly and as fast and as hard as I possibly can. There's no barely touching the throttle and leaving the starting line in these cars at all. I've been asked many times, do you have time or do you breathe during a run down the quarter mile? I can't answer you. I don't know. And I've tried over 20 years of racing to figure that out. It's really amazing. You just forget about that because you have a duty to obtain in the race car. You have a certain sequence of events that you're taking and you're doing, and you don't think about anything else, because if you think about something else, then you're usually not going to be successful. So your concentration level is totally on what you're going to do every time.
Stopping at the end of the track can be a problem. A parachute is the answer, and they are mandatory on cars with a terminal speed of 150 miles an hour and over.
I have a lot of faith in my parachutes. I have 2 on the car, which is mandatory by organizations today. In the old days it wasn't, but I had 2 on them for the last 7 years. I felt all the time that I wanted a safety device just in case. And the reason why some guys didn't put those other parachutes on was weight. They weigh 6 or 8 pounds. And you say, well, what's 6 or 8 pounds if it saves your life? Doesn't mean that you couldn't stop if it doesn't open. Don't misunderstand here. You can, but it makes things a lot rougher.
Kenny always checks his parachute before he makes a run. The forces acting on these drivers are immense. On the start line, the driver is pressed back in the seat with a force of 5 Gs. This eases to 3 Gs toward the end of the track, and then the huge braking power of the chute turns it into a 5 Gs deceleration. The only other people to experience stresses like these are astronauts or jet fighter pilots.
The first round in our form of racing on Sunday when we go for the money is probably the hardest round, because that's the one that starts the day for you. But if I am a little nervous, it is because of the first round, because it's the first one of the day. And you know, if you get beat, you're going home, and you don't want to go home. You want to stay. You want to have fun all day. I don't feel as much pressure really in the final round as I do in the first round. And that seems strange, because you'd say in the final round it's for all the marbles, all the money, all the glory. But I've never felt as much pressure in that round, really, as I have in the first. The sponsors like funny cars because they can get the identity on the side of the car. It's a full-bodied car. It resembles a Ford Tempo or a Mustang, and that's what they're looking for. They like that identity. And the public likes the funny car most because they can identify with the fact that it is a car. No, they can't go buy it on the showroom floor, but they certainly can look at it and know that it's like their Thunderbird or like their Tempo that they're driving on the street and identify it and relate to it.
You have to be fit to stay at the top in drag racing. Kenny Bernstein works out regularly.
We're only in there for 2 minutes 45 seconds worth of time, and there's no 2 or 3 hours of going around 500 miles where you physically are manhandling the car. I don't think it's necessary in drag racing to be physically fit. I do think, however, that if you are physically in pretty good shape, if you do have a routine, it helps you just feel better. And when I feel better, I tend to drive better. I think anyone would do that. It relaxes me. It takes me away from the day-to-day pressures of what is going on at the racetrack with the sponsors, with the PR, with everything that you're surrounded with day to day. It's kind of your little escape that you can go and exhaust your energy and exhaust your muscles, and it makes Kenny feel better. I like it a lot.
I have more weight than I used to.
Kenny is a winner, and to win at this sport, you need a special mental approach.
Mentally, you have to be tough. You have to go up there with the idea that I'm going to murder that starting line, I'm going to catch the right light, and I'm going to make that other driver look so bad that I'm going to win that way. I'm going to go after that guy. I'm not, he's not an enemy. I'm not mad at him, but that's what the driver has to do. I'm going to go up there, and he's not going to embarrass me in any way. I'm going to go up there, and I'm going to leave on him. I'm going to do everything it takes to do everything right that I can, and I'm not going to let that guy embarrass me over there. And that's what a driver has to do. He has to be tough. He has to be tough upstairs, and he has to be able to think under pressure. He has to be able to adjust his abilities down the race course to what is called for at that time. You just can't go in and put the foot down and hang on. It doesn't work. What if you're going sideways? You got to know when to lift. You got to know when to get out of the throttle and what to do to keep the car under control. You got to drive with your head. You got to think. At the same time, you got to be tough.
Tire shaking. Well, I'll tell you, that crew worked hard to reach that kind of level of performance. That's the quickest time of funny car racing this entire 4 days. 5:73 for the Budweiser King, Kenny Bernstein.
It just went like that, and it just started wanting to go this way, and I just, whatever. It wasn't a big deal. It could have been, I guess.